I was a Jewish girl, but I was born in Persia. When I was a little girl, both my parents died. My cousin Mordecai took me in to live with him. Mordecai worked in the king's palace. One day, the king gave me a great feast in his palace. He wanted all the men at the feast to admire his beautiful wife, the queen. When he sent her, she refused to come. The king was so mad that she refused and commanded that he banished her forever from the kingdom, and she would no longer be his queen. The king decided right away that he wanted a new queen. He ordered the most beautiful woman in the kingdom to come and show up to meet him. He would pick the perfect queen from these women. Mordecai sent me too. I was chosen from all the women in the kingdom to be the new queen. But the king did not know I wasn't a Persian. I was a Jew. All the king's advisors were jealous that the king raised me to such high levels of power. One day they devised a plan and tricked the king into making a decree that all the Jews in the land would have to be put to death. I knew that I had to save my people. I threw a feast for my husband every night, and I asked him if I was making him happy as his queen. He was very pleased with me, and I told him about what his advisor had planned for the Jewish people. He declared that he was going to throw a feast for his advisors, and said he had them executed. I was able to save my people in our faith while we were in captivity, and was known as a great queen. Who am I?
When the Israelites started worshiping false gods, the Canaanites came and took over Israel and enslaved our people. God called me to become the judge of Israel. The people honored me even though I was female. They came from every part of the land to get my advice. Usually they found me sitting under a palm tree, and I would settle their disputes for them. The Canaanites sent a great army to march against the Israelites. God sent me to lead an army to defeat them. I called for my general, Barak, to lead the army out. He said that he wouldn't go unless I went too. I told him that I would, but that the credit for his victory would be given to God and alone. We went out with 10,000 men toward Mount Carmel. The Canaanite general Sisera came to meet us with chariots. God caused their army to become confused and panicked. Sisera ran away from the battlefield to the tent of Israelite women named Jael to hide. Jael pretended that she would help him hide him. When he fell asleep, she drove a tent stake through his head and killed him. I became famous as the woman who led Israel and defeated the Canaanites. Who am I?
After 40 years of prosperity under Deborah, the Israelites became careless again. The Midianites began to cause trouble. After this, they began to cry for God, and it worked. They sent me down to save them. They built an altar. I built an altar. I called it "The Lord is Peace." All the Israelites were worshiping Baal, so I took down the groves and worshiping tents. Then they began to attack me. I won, and the Israelites wanted me to lead them into battle against the Midianites. 32,000 soldiers gathered at my tent. I then did the Lord's command and sent 22,000 out. And at the end of the day, there's 300 of the soldiers left. So then, when we beat the Midianites, they would know that it was God's power who saved the people. Then they wanted me to be the ruler. I denied. I then judged Israel for 40 years. Who am I?
When Ahab became king of Israel, he was the worst king they ever had. God sent me to Ahab, telling him to return to God. If he didn't, there would be a terrible drought. That made Ahab really mad, and he sent soldiers to try to find me. I ran to hide by a brook, and every day ravens brought me bread and meat. Then I went to live with the widow and her son, and every day I made sure that their food was always plenty. Then I challenged the prophets, O Baal, to see if my God or their gods could make it rain even though they prayed all morning long. Nothing happened. Then I prayed to my God, and he made it rain. When King Ahab stole his neighbor's vineyard, they had him killed. God sent me to tell him that he and his wife Jezebel would also lose their lives. When I got old, God sent a new prophet to take over me. I taught him everything he needed to know. One day, when we were out walking, a chariot of fire came down and took me up to heaven. I never had to die. Who am I?
I was born near the city of Haran. Laban was my father. One day I was out watering my sheep, and I saw a young man at the well. He was so glad to see me that he kissed me, and I didn't even know him. I took this man to meet my father, and he began to work for us. His name was Jacob. He went to my father and wanted to marry me. My father told Jacob that he could work for us for 7 years, and then he could marry me. Once the 7 years were up, Jacob reminded Laban of their agreement, and he arranged a marriage feast. In the evening, he brought the bride to see Jacob. A veil covered her face. After the ceremony, Jacob wanted to see his bride and lifted the veil, but it was not me, the woman he loved, but instead my older sister, Leah. He was very unhappy that my uncle had lied to him. It's not the custom in my country to let the younger daughter marry first, said Laban. Laban said that if he would serve him for 7 more years, then he could marry me. In those days, most men had several wives. Because Jacob loved me, he worked the 7 more years, and after the 7 years, I became his wife. Who am I?